and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Peter Wright, I'm Head of Communications here at the charity 318. We're an independent Christian safeguarding charity, and for over 40 years we've been supporting churches and other organisations to protect people from abuse by creating safer places together. This podcast is the first in a short series where I'll be speaking with Justin Humphreys, our CEO for safeguarding, about some of the opportunities and safeguarding challenges created by the current coronavirus pandemic. We've created this podcast off the back of a blog we put out recently where we gave our 7 top safeguarding tips for churches responding during this crisis. And when we put out the blog, we had some really interesting feedback and comments. And some that really stood out were where people were saying, I thought all the churches were closed. If the churches are closed, what's the need for safeguarding? And we wanted to respond to that. So Justin, what's your take on that? What's the need for safeguarding if all our churches are closed?
It's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because I think actually what we've found is that it's taken people, well, some people perhaps longer than others, to work out that much of what we do as church can be moved into this online space. And that just because the physical buildings need to be kept closed for health and safety reasons as a part of this coronavirus pandemic, we can still do things virtually. So, I imagine that the shares in Zoom have probably zoomed through the roof as everyone's kind of jumping on to those platforms. But it's really important for us to then be thinking, just as much as we do in the real world, so to speak, we still need to pay attention to all of those things that we're hoping to do virtually, and how safe are they? What mechanisms ought we to be putting in place to make sure that we're connecting with people virtually and safely?
Because it's interesting, isn't it? I think I've seen quite a lot, quite a lot of articles and things from churches. It's almost been a sort of a period of rediscovery as to what the church is and what it's about. We've talked a lot, haven't we, as church, about the fact that church is the people, not the buildings. But suddenly when we're finding our buildings closed and shut and not able to meet together physically, it's almost been like a rediscovery of what that means to be church.
Yeah, definitely. And how exciting is that? Because I think even in a business sense, so for us at 318, we're already getting to a position where we're finding new ways of doing things, and we're kind of saying to each other, well, regardless of what happens as a result of this current situation and how long it lasts, we ought to continue doing certain things in this new way. And I suppose for church, that's likely to be exactly the same. So it's a point of discovery, but actually to some degree, I think it is a point of rediscovery, because certainly I'm aware, going back a number of years, there were lots of churches around the place who were starting to do this kind of live stream thing. And it was seen as innovative and accessible, and all those things are great. And I think particularly in terms of accessibility, what we shouldn't forget, of course, is that live streaming church services and other Christian activities has been a lifeline to certain people who are stranded, isolated, those with certain disabilities that prevent them from getting into the physical church environment. So those things have been there for quite some time. But I think what this is, this current situation is enabling us to do is rediscover the purpose and the benefit of doing things like that. So we're rethinking why we're doing it, how we're doing it. It's opening up new opportunities, and as Justin Welby was saying on the weekend, it looks like it is enabling a greater engagement in Sunday church than we have seen in a long, long time.
Because it's not just as the church is just not moving it online as well as it's also trying to meet the physical needs of the community as well, which I think has been really, really inspiring, really, hasn't it? To sort of see how the church has responded to meeting the needs, particularly of vulnerable people, maybe people who are in that higher vulnerability category, and see the church responding to that as well.
Yeah, that's too right. And I mean, what's fascinating for me is that we're seeing that expression at both a local and a national, if not global level. So we're seeing local church reaching out into its communities, wrapping around those people who are isolated and vulnerable. And we see that same concern being expressed even at a national level. So we've been involved in discussions with other charities who work with vulnerable groups, and in liaison with statutory agencies and government departments to kind of respond to concerns like, well, what's going to happen with all these vulnerable people who are confined within their homes and who we could reasonably expect to be potentially experience a greater level of risk because of that confinement. But also, and particularly a concern for children and young people about whom there may already be existing concerns or challenges. So children who may be subject to a child in need plan or even a child protection plan, how are they being seen? How can we make sure that we stay connected to those young people so we can help to minimize the potential increase in risk that they might be experiencing? And a similar idea would apply to those who are in relationships where there's domestic abuse. So it's great to see the church kind of doing everything from, providing essential food and supplies to those who can't get out, through to the more complex, how do we assist statutory agencies to ensure they can continue to connect with these vulnerable groups, and everything in between. It's an incredible opportunity for the church, and I think the church has a presence in every community to such a degree that, in my view, it is a key player in this response. But along with that opportunity comes an incredible responsibility to do those things well and to do them safely.
So part of the reason we kind of put this blog together, we put together seven tips, didn't we, for churches responding, because it kind of felt that as the church sort of jumped and rushed forward to respond, there was a real sense that actually it was really important that, although it felt like we're in a different world where normal rules don't apply, that actually the rules are still there, are still to be followed, and they're there for a reason. Yeah,
absolutely. So kind of going back to the top of today's podcast, it is about making sure that wherever we are connecting with people, and particularly where we are doing that in new ways, that we are continually and consistently mindful of the safeguarding aspect of those things that we are doing and planning to do. So, that is where our top tips start, isn't it? It's about making sure that we engage our safeguarding lead, whatever we call them, coordinator, designated lead, safeguarding officer. We're engaging that person in thinking through and talking about the ways in which we might be adapting and evolving the things that we do. So in our training, we sometimes kind of say that, safeguarding needs to be like that stick of rock. So
yes.
Wherever you break it, you can see the word safeguarding written through it. And that kind of encourages us to think, what are the safeguarding implications? Is this the safest way to do what we're planning to do?
So we've got these 7 points that we're going to work through, and the idea being that we'll spend a bit of time on each of those, isn't it? So the first is exactly that: it's engaging the safeguarding lead, because I think quite often, I know when we speak with the safeguarding leads in churches, there is kind of some sort of challenge, isn't there, or a tension between them trying to get their voice heard at the table, and sometimes try and make sure that safeguarding is included in part of the new activities. And quite often, I think churches are really good, aren't they? When they're thinking of doing new things, they're planning carefully to do a new activity or to launch a new service. That does tend to be part of their thinking. But I guess the danger here is because things are moving so quickly and so fast, and people aren't as physically connected as they were, that there is perhaps the potential for that to get missed and for that to get missed out. So part of what we're trying to do is try and give people those, I guess, reminders, aren't they? They're reminders of what to include, what to think about, to just sort of pause, take that time to plan, even if you're trying to find yourself responding really quickly to what is quite a fast rate of change, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think those 7 top tips which we may kind of whisk through today. In order for these 7 things to be embedded, I guess what we need to consider is, how much is safeguarding genuinely seen as an integral part of the mission and ministry of the church? So even going back to the reasons for why we rebranded as a charity and ended up calling ourselves 31:8, we all know the reference to Proverbs 31:8, was because this was the mandate. This was the instruction, if you like, which helps us to embed everything we do with that mindset that says, look after the vulnerable amongst you. Do everything you can to meet their needs. And I think if we're able to communicate that message as a first base, then the other things, like these 7 top tips, become so much easier to embed.
So do you think this sort of current situation really is going to be a test of that? Really, it's going to be, isn't it, a test of sort of churches, their culture perhaps, and how seriously take these issues going forward?
I think it will be. I think that these are trying, testing, challenging times for all of us in different ways. And we often talk about that analogy, don't we? That our greatest growth comes in the periods of greatest challenge. And I think that for many churches, these sorts of things will indeed be a test as to how able are they to safely flex their arrangements. And there will undoubtedly be mistakes made. And we should expect that. But at the same time, I hope and pray that there are going to be some wonderful examples at the end of all of this to point towards where good practice has been showcased in relation to safer practice in terms of online work. So I'm kind of excited to see what all this brings.
For those safeguarding coordinators who are listening to this and thinking through how they could work and support churches, what would you sort of say to them about this time and how they could be best inputting into their church?
I guess all I would say to safeguarding coordinators is make yourself known. Remind your teams of your existence. Maybe even if you feel able to highlight to your teams some of the things that you are thinking about in relation to safeguarding, and how that might play out with some of the developments and plans that are going on. So, kind of put yourself out there, if you like, and remind people that you're there and encourage them to think about the challenges.
Because I guess it could be quite a daunting thing for people, can't it? Because I know we're all in the same boat, but it's not a situation any of us have ever really encountered before. And although we've had the training about how to respond to abuse and how to spot the signs and how to report it, we're finding ourselves in a completely different sort of space now, aren't we? And I guess that can be quite a time when people can really maybe sort of feel really unsure about how best to, I guess, to advise the church and how best to support the church. What sort of advice and help can we point them to for that?
Okay, well, I think the 31:8 website, if you're listening to this podcast, the chances are that you're aware of the 31:8 website anyway, but what I would encourage people to do is visit the website, have a look at the 7 top tips, but also have a look around at some of the other material that we've got there. We've got some stuff which is openly available to anybody and everybody. There's a whole raft of stuff that kind of sits behind that as part of the benefits that we offer to our members. But I guess what I would say overall is this is new territory. We are all embarking into this period for the first time, because none of us have been here before. And in doing that, just know and be confident that you're not on your own. You know, that there are other organisations out there like ourselves who are gearing themselves up to hopefully meet your needs in responding to the needs of your communities. So we're hoping to resource you, to give you helpful guides, to give you bite-sized bits of assistance. So there's quite a lot of it out there, and there are some groups which are beginning to form that are starting to bring some of that material together, and we as a charity have been working with a number of those to offer to them what we've got to kind of be part of a broader package, you know, so seek those things out and make use of them, because some of that stuff is really, really good.
And I guess that's kind of the point of what we're trying to do here, isn't it, really? It's about giving people a bit of a chance to kind of think through some of those things, take a bit of time just to stop and to think about some of the implications and practicalities of how they might respond. So that's been really helpful, Justin. Thank you. So we're going to, we've got these 7 points. I'm sure there probably could be 70 points. There's so much going on, isn't there? So many needs. But we've kept it down to the holy 7. And we're going to be working through one of each episode, and delving into that in a bit more depth and talking through some of those issues. But for people that are listening, do make sure you go onto our website, check out the blog, have a look through those 7 points just as a starter to get you thinking. And hopefully, as we go through that in each episode, we can give a bit more information, a bit more detail, a bit more conversation around what that might look like in practice. So that's really helpful for you where you are. So Justin, thanks very much. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Good to talk to you. And I hope that for our first podcast that our listeners, how many of them there may be or how few, that it's been helpful.